The grand concourse of the Consortium diplomatic vessel Eternal Magnanimity glittered with a calculated opulence that would have impressed anyone who hadn't seen the identical display in 17 other unique diplomatic settings across the galaxy. Banners of 34 species hung from ceiling fixtures that hummed with anti-gravity tech, necessary but showy, very on-brand for the Consortium. "Do you think they realize how transparent this theater is?" muttered Lead Negotiator Thorne, her ceremonial uniform itching at the collar. Admiral Blackwood, commander of what the Consortium believed was the entirety of Earth's pitiful defense fleet, kept his face immobile. "That would require self-awareness, Ness." The Consortium representatives clustered near the treaty table, their translators working overtime as they discussed humanity in what they believed were hushed tones. The acoustics of the chamber had been designed to carry every whisper to the central dais, another subtle display of superiority that human acoustic engineers had identified within 12 seconds of entering the room. "Observe how the human delegation maintains physical proximity," remarked Ambassador Zed Trill, chief diplomat of the Vrex Confederacy. "Their primitive biology demands constant reassurance through pack behavior." "Fascinating how they've made it this far," agreed High Commander Pollux, his forearms adjusting the medals on his uniform. The Oolong military leader flexed his neck ridges with barely concealed contempt. Their defense grids couldn't repel a moderate solar flare. Thorne cleared her throat. The Consortium representatives swiveled as one, mandibles and facial appendages arranged in expressions of polite welcome that didn't reach any of their varied ocular organs. "We're prepared to begin the treaty formalization," she announced, voice steady and earnest. Behind her eyes, calculations ran, probability matrices and timing sequences that had been refined over 5 years of preparation for this exact moment. Ambassador Zgatrill glided forward. "The Consortium of Superior Species welcomes Earth's wisdom in seeking alliance. Your planet's resources and strategic position will be valued additions to our collective." The translator smoothed out the condescension, but the subharmonics came through clearly enough. "Earth is grateful for your protection," Thorne responded, hitting each syllable with precisely the right amount of desperate gratitude. Not too much, that would trigger suspicion, just enough to feed their assumptions. The treaty ceremony proceeded with mind-numbing protocols designed to emphasize the Consortium's generosity and Earth's dependency. Thorne signed where indicated, paused for the ceremonial exchange of digital keys, and maintained an expression of solemn relief throughout. "The defense grid integration timetables are outlined in Appendix C," droned Commissioner Elliptics, the Consortium's technology overseer. "Your military facilities will begin receiving our supervisory teams within the lunar cycle." Admiral Blackwood's jaw tightened minutely. Only Thorne noticed. "We've prepared accommodations for your teams at each location," he responded, the words rehearsed so often they emerged flawlessly. "Our defensive capabilities are eager for improvement." High Commander Pollux made the gurgling sound that passed for laughter among the Oolong. "Improvement is an understatement, Admiral. Your kinetic barriers wouldn't stop a civilian transport." Blackwood allowed a flush of embarrassment to color his neck. "We've done our best with limited understanding of cosmic threats. Which is why this alliance benefits us all," Ambassador Zgatrill interjected smoothly. "The Consortium protects its own." The treaty tablets glowed with completed authentication sequences. Representatives from each Consortium species pressed appendages to the verification panel, leaving behind genetic markers that bound their governments to the agreement. Across the room, Junior Attaché Wellin fumbled with a ceremonial cup, sending it clattering to the floor. Heads turned at the disruption, attention diverted for 2.7 seconds. During that precise window, Thorne's neural implant transmitted a compressed data packet through the Consortium's own communication array, a message that would reach Earth's deep space monitoring stations within the hour. Phase 1 complete. "We look forward to a prosperous future together," Thorne announced, her voice carrying the perfect blend of humility and hope. What the Consortium delegates heard: "We are desperate for your protection." Little value. What she meant: the trap is set. The reception that followed featured delicacies from all 34 Consortium worlds, and a modest offering of Earth cuisine that had been deliberately under-seasoned and presented poorly. Consortium representatives sampled the human food with exaggerated politeness before discreetly disposing of it. "Your species will advance quickly under our guidance," Commissioner Elliptics assured Thorne, mandibles clicking in what the Xanthori considered a comforting gesture. "Many developing worlds struggle with the transition to galactic protocols, but the adjustment period typically lasts only a few generations." "How reassuring," Thorne replied, sipping a beverage that looked alcoholic but wasn't. No human on the diplomatic team had consumed actual intoxicants in months. "We're eager students." Across the room, Admiral Blackwood engaged with military representatives, sharing carefully sanitized data about Earth's defense systems. Each disclosure had been meticulously crafted by intelligence analysts to reveal exactly what the Consortium already knew or had incorrectly deduced. "These orbital platforms," High Commander Pollux remarked, talon tapping on the holographic display, "they rely on chemical propellants." "Unfortunately," Blackwood confirmed with convincing resignation, "our antimatter containment technology remains theoretical." The Yulon commander couldn't quite suppress his disdainful snort. "The Consortium will address such shortcomings promptly." "Earth looks forward to your expertise," Blackwood responded, knowing that the actual antimatter production facilities buried beneath Olympus Mons had been operational for 23 years. As the reception wound down, Thorne made her way to the observation deck. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the blackness. Vulnerable, isolated, exactly as they wanted it to appear. Ambassador Zictril joined her, compound eyes reflecting the planet's oceans. "A beautiful homeworld. The Consortium will ensure it remains so." "That means everything to us," Thorne replied, allowing her eyes to glisten slightly. "Protection is all we've sought since discovering we weren't alone." The Frex diplomat placed a segmented limb on her shoulder in what species briefings had indicated was meant as a comforting gesture. "The galaxy can be treacherous for singular planets, but you need not fear any longer." "No," Thorne agreed, gazing at Earth with an expression carefully calibrated to read as relieved gratitude. "I believe the time for fear is passing." What the ambassador didn't see: her neural implant quietly mapping the vessel's defense grid through micro-fluctuations in the ambient energy field. What the ambassador couldn't know: humanity had intercepted and decoded Consortium battle plans 8 years ago, before the aliens had even made official first contact. The peace treaty wasn't just a lie, it was bait. And the Consortium had just taken it, hook and all. 6 standard months could change everything, or nothing at all, depending on who was doing the counting. For the Consortium war fleet now advancing toward Earth, it represented the minimum waiting period their strategic doctrines recommended between establishing a treaty and executing what they euphemistically termed full integration. For humanity, it had been precisely enough time to complete preparations that began decades before first contact. Aboard the Consortium dreadnought, unassailable logic, Supreme War Executor Nemoria inspected the tactical display with all 6 eyes blinking in sequence. a sign of anticipation among the karate. "Approach vectors locked," announced Navigation Officer Telex. The humans have detected nothing. Their primitive scanning arrays remain focused on commercial traffic lanes. "As expected," Namori replied, tentacles rippling with satisfaction. "Status of the Earth defense grid." Strategic Intelligence Director Vox stepped forward, data crystals gleaming in his ceremonial headdress. "Operating at minimal capacity, our embedded advisory teams report the humans followed all recommended upgrades to their systems." He paused, allowing for appropriate appreciation of this fact. 37% of their weapons platforms are currently offline for the scheduled maintenance cycle we suggested. Appreciative clicks and whistles circulated through the command deck. The Consortium had performed this operation on 17 other worlds. It had become almost routine. Identify a strategically positioned planet, offer protection, install advisors, recommend system improvements, then strike when defenses were conveniently compromised. The resource harvesting would begin immediately afterward, with minimal indigenous resistance. "Begin the approach," Namori ordered. "Remind all vessels, we want their infrastructure intact. The population centers in their northern hemisphere are expendable, but the manufacturing facilities must be preserved." Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, in a command center that didn't exist in any Consortium intelligence file, Lead Negotiator Thorne watched the approaching fleet materialize on displays that shouldn't have been capable of detecting ships in fold space. "Right on schedule," she noted, tapping a command sequence that activated data feeds from surveillance platforms disguised as orbital debris. "They brought 9 dreadnoughts instead of the projected 7. "Someone's feeling cautious," commented Fleet Commander Okafor, his hands moving across the neural interface panel. "Deploying ghost signals now." Across Earth's orbital space, dormant systems flickered to life. Not the obsolete defense platforms visible to Consortium observers, but an entirely different network that had remained veiled behind specialized dampening fields and quantum camouflage. "Planet-side teams, status?" Thorne asked. The communications array lit up with confirmations from command posts scattered across every continent. None use conventional transmission channels that the Consortium could monitor. Instead, they traveled through artificially generated quantum entanglement pathways, technology the aliens believed humans wouldn't discover for at least another century. "Narration, weapons free but dormant," reported European Command. "Advisory teams contained." "Contained?" Thorne raised an eyebrow. "They're enjoying a simulation of routine maintenance while locked in environments that match their biometric signatures to their ship's life support systems," explained General Cavani from Asian Command. "They believe they're monitoring our activities. In reality, they've been watching pre-recorded feeds since week 1. Thorne checked the countdown timer. "They'll transition from fold space in 5 minutes. Activation protocols ready?" "Affirmative," Okafor confirmed. "Shadow Fleet awaiting coordinates." Aboard the unassailable logic, the triumph was practically palpable. The command deck hummed with anticipation as the warfleet prepared to emerge from fold space, directly within striking distance of Earth's feeble defenses. "Transition in 30 seconds, announced Telex. "Weapon systems preheating." Namoria extended her command tentacles into the neural interface. "The Consortium thanks Earth for its sacrifice. Their resources will serve a greater purpose." The familiar disorientation of fold space transition rippled through the vessel. The view screen adjusted, expected to show a vulnerable Earth with minimal defensive posture. Instead, an armada awaited them. "Impossible," whispered Vox, data crystals suddenly dim with shock. "Sensors must be malfunctioning." "Recalibrate," ordered Namoria, all 6 eyes wide and fixed. "This cannot be accurate." But the sensor readings remained unchanged. Where there should have been primitive orbital platforms, hundreds of vessels held position in a formation that military doctrine texts across the galaxy would recognize as the legendary Thermopylae configuration. A defensive posture so complex it required neural coordination across multiple vessels, a formation that should have been beyond human capability by at least 3 centuries. "We're being hailed," croaked the communications officer, voice synthesizer crackling with distress. Nemoria didn't respond immediately. Her species' military doctrines had no protocol for this scenario. Finally, she gestured with a reluctant tentacle. "Display." Admiral Blackwood's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression neither triumphant nor angry, merely expectant, like someone watching the inevitable conclusion of a mathematical equation. "Supreme War Executor Nemoria," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Your arrival was predicted to the minute. Impressive punctuality." Nemoria's respiratory slits flared. "What deception is this? Earth possesses no such fleet." "Correction," Blackwood replied calmly. "Earth possessed no fleet you were permitted to detect. There's a substantial difference." On secondary screens, tactical officers reported with increasing panic that the human vessels were not simply defensive platforms, but specialized combat ships. Worse, they appeared to incorporate technologies from across the galaxy, some recognizable, others entirely novel. "The treaty," began Nemoria, "was accepted in bad faith by both parties," Blackwood finished. "The difference is, we knew you were lying, you merely suspected we might be." Before Nemoria could respond, alarms shrieked across her command deck. Something was happening to the Consortium fleet's systems. Security protocols were being bypassed, weapon systems locked down, engines cycling into emergency standby. "We're being hacked," shouted the cybersecurity officer, appendages flailing across controls. "They've penetrated our quantum firewalls." "That's not possible," Vox insisted. "Their computing technology is limited to—" "Whatever we allowed you to document," Blackwood interjected. "Your intelligence on Earth was comprehensive, detailed, and entirely curated." Nemoria felt the deck shudder beneath her. The neural interface was reporting impossible data. Weapons disabled, engines compromised, even life support now under external regulation. Around her, the command staff worked frantically to regain control, but their efforts produced nothing. "You've made your point," she said finally. "What are your terms?" Blackwood's expression didn't change. "Terms come after understanding. Right now, you don't understand what's happening, so terms would be meaningless." On a secondary screen, a new alert flashed. The tactical officer made a sound of pure distress. "More vessels emerging from fold space," they reported. "Hundreds more. They're surrounding the entire fleet. We're boxed in completely." A new face appeared on the transmission. Lead Negotiator Thorne. "The containment is complete," she announced to someone off-screen, then turned her attention to Nemoria. "Your invasion force is now secured. To prevent any unfortunate misunderstandings, we've temporarily assumed control of your essential systems." "This is an act of war against the entire Consortium," Nemoria warned, tentacles rigid with fury. "No," Thorne corrected. "This is a proportional response to your act of war. The difference is significant under galactic protocols." The implication wasn't lost on anyone present. Somehow, these supposedly primitive humans were not only citing advanced diplomatic concepts, but implementing them with military precision. "You tricked us," Vox realized aloud, data crystals now dark with comprehension. "We allowed you to trick yourselves," Thorne replied. "Your assumptions about humanity were your own. We simply chose not to correct them." The view screen split to show multiple feeds. Consortium advisory teams contained in secured facilities around Earth. Supposed weaknesses in planetary defenses now revealing highly advanced systems, and orbital platforms transforming as stealth fields deactivated. Nemoria stared at the evidence of thorough, methodical counterintelligence, unlike anything the Consortium had encountered in thousands of years of conquest. "What happens now?" she asked, the confidence gone from her voice. "Now," said Thorne, "we renegotiate. But first, you need to meet the rest of humanity." The view screen changed again to show something that left the entire command deck speechless. Hundreds of additional human vessels emerging from fold points, much deeper than the Consortium had believed possible for Earth technology. They had walked into a trap generations in the making, and they never stood a chance. 15 years earlier, beneath the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, a meeting had taken place that would determine the fate of interstellar politics for centuries to come. This was no ordinary gathering. The highest-ranking intelligence directors from every major power had assembled in a chamber so secure that its very existence demanded the integration of 11 separate quantum encryption protocols just to appear on classified location registers. The Proxima Centauri Deep Space Monitoring Array picked up the transmissions 3 days ago, Director Cheng announced, displaying data streams across the room's central holographic matrix. They're not trying to be subtle about their communications. Either they don't believe we can decrypt them, or they don't care if we do, finished Director Nwachukwu, arms crossed over her chest. Classic intimidation protocol. We've seen similar patterns with emergent civilizations throughout history. Around the table, the assembled leadership digested this assessment. The evidence was undeniable. An advanced collective of species was discussing Earth not as a potential ally, but as an acquisition target. The translation algorithms are still processing contextual frameworks, continued Cheng, but the strategic intent is unmistakable. They call themselves the Consortium and operate on a cycle of identification, assessment, engagement, and absorption. Meaning, they find planets, evaluate their worth, establish diplomatic ties, then conquer them, clarified Admiral Renkin, the youngest person in the room by several decades. The question is not whether they're coming, but when. Intelligence Director Zhao leaned forward. The more pressing question is how we respond. Do we reveal our actual technological capabilities when they arrive, potentially scaring them off, but revealing our advancements to the broader galactic community, or do we play the part they expect, a naive, developing world desperate for protection? A contemplative silence fell over the assembly until Fleet Commander Okafor, then just a strategic analyst, spoke up from the far end of the table. "We give them exactly what they expect to see," she proposed. "Not just what they expect, but what they want to see." 8 years later, in an underground facility beneath Geneva's Lake District, Okafor, now elevated to Fleet Commander, watched technicians applying final adjustments to what appeared to be primitive defense satellites. "The outer shells contain exactly the technology level they'd expect us to possess," explained Chief Engineer Valdez, gesturing toward the deceptively simple-looking devices. "Rudimentary kinetic barriers, chemical propellants, targeting systems that look impressive to us but laughable to them." "And beneath those shells?" asked Lead Negotiator Thorne, examining the schematics. Valdez grinned. "Quantum entanglement communication nodes that will map their entire fleet architecture the moment they're in proximity. Once deployed, these satellites form a dormant mesh network that can interface with their systems and execute protocol Trojan horse." Thorne nodded approvingly. "How's progress on the advisory team containment protocols?" "Complete," replied Valdez. "We've constructed perfect replicas of their various biological environments. connected to sensory manipulators that will feed them exactly what they expect to monitor. They'll believe they're observing our facilities while actually watching pre-rendered simulations. And the fleet? Fleet Commander Okafor stepped forward, activating a secondary display. Construction completed 3 months ahead of schedule. The Jupiter shipyards are operating at maximum capacity, and the Venus deep space docks have finished integrating the quantum displacement drives. We'll have over 500 vessels ready when the Consortium makes their move, which our projections indicate will occur approximately 6 months after treaty signing, added Thorne. Their historical patterns suggest they consider this an adequate waiting period to avoid suspicion. Okafor's expression darkened. The most difficult aspect remains maintaining the facade. Every human on Earth must believe we're genuinely entering this treaty with minimal defenses. The deception must be absolute, even in private communication. The compartmentalization protocol is functioning as designed, Thorne assured her. Only 18 individuals on the planet know the full scope of Operation Candid Camera. Everyone else involved knows only their specific component. The Consortium's telepathic species won't detect any deception because the vast majority of humans genuinely believe in our technological inferiority. 3 years before that strategy session, in a nondescript office building in Brussels, a junior analyst named Rishi Kapoor had made the discovery that changed everything.
The mathematical patterns are unmistakable, he had explained to his skeptical supervisor, pointing to data correlations across decades of astronomical observations. These aren't random energy fluctuations in the Alpha Centauri system. They're communications. And based on the frequency shifts, they're discussing us. His supervisor had dismissed the findings as speculative, but Kapoor persisted, eventually routing his analysis through unconventional channels until it reached someone who recognized its significance. 3 days later, he found himself presenting to a panel of stern-faced individuals who never offered their names. These communication bursts follow a predictable sequence, Kapoor explained, hands shaking slightly as he manipulated the holographic display. First observation, then assessment, followed by what appears to be strategic planning. Based on the increasing frequency, I estimate first contact within 5 years. And you believe these communications indicate hostile intent? Asked one of the unnamed officials. Not overtly hostile, Kapoor clarified. More predatory. The pattern matches historical human interactions between technologically disparate civilizations. The stronger party doesn't immediately attack. They establish relations first, create dependency, then absorb or conquer when resistance would be minimal.
The room had fallen silent. Then one of the officials spoke 5 words that would alter the course of human history. Operation Looking Glass begins now. In the present moment, aboard the captured Consortium flagship, Supreme War Executor Nemoria found herself escorted to what the humans called a conference room. The chamber bore little resemblance to Consortium diplomatic facilities. No ostentatious displays of technological superiority, no subtle architectural intimidation tactics. Just a simple table, comfortable seating adjusted for her physiological requirements, and a view screen showing Earth rotating peacefully against the stars. Lead Negotiator Thorne entered, accompanied by Admiral Blackwood, and a third human Nemoria didn't recognize. "Allow me to introduce Director Kapoor," Thorne said. "He's the one who first identified your species' communication patterns and predicted your intentions. In many ways, you owe your current situation to his insight." The unassuming human nodded politely. "The mathematics of your communication frequencies was quite distinctive." "Impossible," Nemoria refuted. "Our transmissions were encrypted using quantum phase shifting. No developing civilization could possibly—" "That's your fundamental misunderstanding," interrupted Kapoor. "You presumed our technological development followed the same trajectory as yours. It didn't. Thorne activated the table's holographic display, showing a timeline of human technological advancement, with particular emphasis on a massive acceleration point approximately 80 years earlier. While most species developed space travel before mastering quantum mechanics, humanity's path was different, she explained. Political divisions delayed our expansion beyond our planet, but accelerated advancements in mathematics, cryptography, and physics. By the time we detected your first probe at the edge of our solar system, we'd already developed the theoretical framework for technologies you believe are centuries beyond us. Nemoria's tentacles twitched with agitation. This changes nothing. The Consortium encompasses 34 species across 17 sectors. Your deception may have thwarted this fleet, but we didn't just prepare for this fleet. Admiral Blackwood cut in. While you've been contained here, similar scenarios have played out across your territory. 78% of your military assets are currently under our control. To demonstrate, he activated a secondary display showing Consortium worlds with human fleets in orbit, worlds that should have been untouchable strongholds. How? Nemoria demanded, voice synthesizer crackling with distress. You've never been to these systems. Actually, we have, corrected Kapoor. Your underestimation of our fold space capabilities was particularly useful. While you believed we were confined to our solar system, we mapped your entire territorial expanse. Thorne leaned forward. Every world where you've applied your protection has been contacted. Every species you've subjugated has been offered alliance. The Consortium as you knew it ceased to exist approximately 43 minutes ago. For the first time in her distinguished military career, Nemoria found herself completely outmaneuvered. What happens to my people? She asked quietly. Thorne's expression softened slightly. That depends on what you've learned today. You want surrender? Nemoria's respiratory slits flared with indignation. No, replied Thorne, surprising her. We want genuine collaboration. The threats in this galaxy are real, which is why your species began building the Consortium in the first place. Your mistake wasn't seeking strength through unity. It was believing that deception and domination were necessary components of that process. Blackwood nodded. Your civilizations possess knowledge and capabilities that complement our own. We genuinely see potential for mutual advancement, just not under the terms you originally envisioned. Nemoria studied the humans carefully, all 6 eyes blinking in sequence as she processed this unexpected development. And if we refuse? Then you return to your homeworlds with your military assets neutralized and your subject planets liberated, Thorne replied simply. We're not conquerors, Executor Nemoria. We're simply not prey. The Supreme War Executor of the once mighty Consortium found herself facing a reality that no strategic simulation had ever prepared her for. A species that had outplayed a galactic power by appearing weak when they were strong, vulnerable when they were prepared, and naive when they had anticipated every move decades in advance. I believe, Nemoria said finally, we should discuss these new terms. Galactic history books would later mark the event as the de-redistribution, a bloodless revolution that transformed interstellar politics without firing a single shot. But for those who witnessed the proceedings aboard the newly christened diplomatic vessel Mutual Understanding, formerly the Consortium flagship, there was nothing academic about watching the power dynamics of a 1,000-year hegemony dissolve in real time. The representatives from Zalix Prime are requesting an adjustment to their speaking order, murmured Protocol Officer Winters, managing the chaotic influx of diplomatic communications from 34 formerly subjugated species. They're concerned their grievances will seem trivial following the Mazari delegation. Chief Diplomat Abasi nodded without looking up from her notations. Accommodate them. The psychological elements are as crucial as the substantive ones. Around them, the conference chamber bustled with activity as delegations from across former Consortium space prepared for the unprecedented gathering. Unlike the ostentatious displays that characterized previous diplomatic venues, this space had been deliberately designed for functional equality. The circular arrangement ensuring no position held prominence over others, environmental controls customized for each species, and translation systems that preserved cultural nuances often lost in standard protocols. Remarkable how quickly former oppressors adapt to new circumstances, observed Commander Hayek, who had replaced Admiral Blackwood as Earth's military representative. Yesterday they were conquest administrators. Today they're earnestly discussing trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Fear and opportunity produce similar biochemical responses in most sentient species, replied Abasi. The difference lies in which emotion ultimately prevails. The doors parted to admit Lead Negotiator Thorne, now Interim Coalition Director Thorne, accompanied by former Supreme War Executor Nemoria, whose new title of Karate Representative seemed almost diminutive by comparison. The once imposing alien moved with less confidence, her tentacles subdued, but her 6 eyes remained alert and evaluative. The session begins in 20 minutes, Thorne announced. Final delegations are docking now. Nemoria gestured toward the gathering representatives with a tentacle. They expect retribution. It colors every interaction. A reasonable expectation given historical precedent, Thorne acknowledged, which is precisely why today's proceedings will be enlightening for everyone involved. Across the chamber, previously unacquainted species cautiously engaged with one another, finding common ground in their shared experiences under Consortium rule. The Mazari delegation, crystalline beings whose mathematical consciousness had been exploited for computational purposes, chimed harmoniously as they conversed with the methane-breathing Duvari, whose atmospheric engineering skills had been forcibly repurposed for terraforming operations. Your liberation arrived much as ours did, resonated the Mazari prime equation. Human vessels emerged from fold space above our computational arrays, immediately neutralized Consortium control systems, and offered alliance instead of subjugation. The same sequence occurred at our atmospheric conversion facilities, confirmed Duvari High Processor Vex through his environmental suit's translator. Their tactical precision was unnerving. Not a single molecular destabilizer was damaged during the transition of authority. Nearby, a delegation of Ulon military officers, former enforcers of Consortium, will isolated until a human diplomatic attaché deliberately approached their group. The Mazari delegation has expressed interest in discussing cooperative defensive protocols, the human informed them. Your expertise in gravitational manipulation would complement their mathematical modeling capabilities. The Ulon commander blinked in confusion. Our services are desired. Your skills are, the human corrected gently, separate from the purposes they were previously directed toward. Similar scenes unfolded throughout the chamber as former oppressors, victims, and neutral parties found themselves guided into configurations that emphasized complementary abilities rather than hierarchical relationships. The humans moved through these interactions with practiced ease, their apparent youth as a spacefaring species belied by diplomatic sophistication that suggested centuries of experience in managing complex multi-species dynamics. When the formal session began, the assembled representatives fell silent as Director Thorne took the central podium, the only time in the proceedings when any single entity would hold. I welcome you all to what historians may someday call the first genuine galactic coalition, she began, not built on conquest or deception, but on a recognition of mutual benefit through authentic cooperation. The translation systems rendered her words simultaneously in 35 languages, each calibrated to cultural frameworks that would convey the proper emphasis. Today we present a new accord, one drafted with input from every world represented in this chamber. But before the terms are formalized, there's a misconception that requires addressing. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembly. Many of you believe humanity orchestrated recent events because we detected your communications and uncovered your plans. This is partially true, but incomplete. Our response wasn't merely reactive. It was the implementation of a strategy developed long before we became aware of specific external threats. A murmur rippled through the gathered species. For over a century, humanity has been preparing for first contact with advanced civilizations, not because we detected you, but because we studied ourselves. The view screen activated, displaying scenes from human history: conquests, colonization, subjugation of technologically disadvantaged populations. We recognized patterns in our own development that suggested how more advanced civilizations might approach encounters with less developed ones. We didn't need to intercept your communications to anticipate your intentions. We merely needed to examine how power disparities have historically been exploited. The tactics change, but the underlying motivations rarely do. The representatives from predatory species shifted uncomfortably, while those from formerly subjugated worlds leaned forward with increasing interest. This insight led us to a crucial decision. Rather than announcing our advancements to the galaxy and potentially triggering preemptive actions from established powers, we would present ourselves as less developed than we actually were. Not out of fear, but to observe how we would be treated when perceived as vulnerable. She gestured toward Nemoria, who rose to join her at the podium. The Consortium representatives who approached Earth did exactly what our models predicted. They offered protection while planning conquest. We allowed this deception to unfold, not to humiliate anyone, but to demonstrate a fundamental truth. Genuine cooperation cannot exist alongside predatory intent. Nemoria's voice synthesizer produced the karate equivalent of a contemplative sigh before she addressed the assembly. For 1,000 cycles, the Consortium operated under the belief that domination was the only stable form of interspecies relationship. We considered ourselves enlightened because we preferred infiltration to immediate destruction, assimilation to extinction. Today, I acknowledge the fundamental flaw in that philosophy. Her tentacles extended in the karate gesture of profound admission. The efficiency with which humanity neutralized our military capabilities across 17 sectors wasn't merely a technological achievement. It was proof that cooperation, when genuine, creates capabilities greater than subjugation ever could. 34 distinct species coordinating willingly accomplish more than the same number operating under duress. Director Thorne activated the table's central display, revealing the document formally titled the Galactic Mutual Recognition Accord. This treaty, unlike its predecessor, contains no hidden clauses, no disguised power grabs, no foundation for future betrayal. Its core principles are transparent: autonomy for all signatory worlds, technological exchange based on mutual benefit, and collective defense against genuine threats. The document rotated slowly above the table, its provisions translated simultaneously for all present. There is a reason we call ourselves human beings rather than simply humans, Thorne continued. Our identity encompasses both what we are and what we do, our existence and our actions. Perhaps the same should apply to interstellar relationships. We propose an alliance defined not by what species comprise it, but by how those species relate to one another. Throughout the chamber, representatives from former Consortium worlds studied the Accord's provisions with varying degrees of surprise and curiosity. Where they had expected punishment, they found opportunity. Where they anticipated restrictions, they discovered collaborative frameworks. The predatory philosophy that guided the Consortium was never truly logical, Thorne concluded. It was merely familiar, a continuation of biological imperatives that technological sophistication should have transcended. True advancement isn't measured by weapon capability or territorial expansion, but by the ability to recognize mutual benefit without requiring the exploitation of others. As the formal review process began, representatives broke into discussion groups organized by complementary expertise rather than species or political alignment. Former enemies found themselves collaboratively analyzing provisions relevant to shared interests, while human facilitators guided discussions toward synthesis rather than competition. Hours later, in a small observational lounge overlooking the proceedings, Director Kapoor joined Thorne as she watched the various delegations interact with increasing comfort. The Mezari and Ulon have jointly proposed amendments to the defense protocols, he noted. Former enemies designing security systems together. That's encouraging. Thorne nodded. And the Xanthori are discussing atmospheric engineering with the Duvari. Apparently, they've harbored admiration for Duvari methodologies for decades, but were forbidden from acknowledging it under Consortium doctrine. Do you think it will last? Kapoor asked, gesturing toward the diverse gathering. This coalition of equals? Nothing lasts without maintenance, Thorne replied. But we've created something sustainable because it benefits everyone involved. The Consortium failed because it required constant energy to maintain asymmetrical relationships. This structure is more efficient. It harnesses natural collaborative instincts rather than suppressing them. Kapoor smiled slightly. They believed us weak because we presented ourselves as technologically inferior. The irony is that our greatest strength wasn't technological at all. No, agreed Thorne. It was anthropological, our understanding of how intelligent species behave, derived from studying our own history. We didn't outsmart them with better weapons, we outmaneuvered them with better insights. Below, the various delegations were concluding their review sessions, representatives affixing verification markers to the Accord's final draft. No grandiose ceremony, no architectural intimidation, no posturing. Just pragmatic recognition of mutual benefit. There's an ancient human concept, Thorne mused, watching as former Supreme War Executor Nemoria engaged respectfully with a delegation from a world her forces had once subjugated. The strongest position in any negotiation belongs to the party willing to walk away. We were always prepared to stand alone, Kapoor acknowledged. Which is precisely why we never will, Thorne concluded, as the newly formed coalition took its first steps toward a genuinely cooperative future. The peace treaty had been a lie, but the truth that replaced it was far more valuable than any deception could ever be.